fade in because we can always cut in the titles.
Yeah, Gloria, just fade in. It's fine. We don't have to run the title in. It's fine. Because Eric's going to do some post-production on it. Glow, just start it. It's fine. It's fine, please.
Be quiet.
Hi, I'm Edwin Samuelson, and welcome to the CineFiles, your weekly film fix, a.k.a. the show that allows you to...
That's awesome. Where's your mustache?
Don't fucking do that, guys. No, it's okay. Let's go. I'm Edwin Samuelson. This is the CineFiles. Today we're discussing Eric's pet project, which is shit kicker movies. Go ahead.
Shit kicker movies.
Yeah.
We are discussing that great American genre, the Western. That is our topic. We're actually doing sort of a two-parter, right? The first part we're gonna we kind of wanted to do spaghetti westerns, but we decided to narrow it down, just do the Man with No Name trilogy. In the second part, we're gonna give you a little overview of American westerns. But I guess this specific part of the two-part show is going to be about the Man with No Name trilogy, Sergio Leone's famous
Macaroni series.
Sure.
That's what they call it in Japan. Actually, is a macaroni western.
Macaroni westerns.
That's why I think it was weird.
Spaghetti westerns, which is even though they were mostly produced by Italians, a lot of them were shot in Spain.
Because Spain had a very similar terrain to the old Wild West with the deserts and the hills and the mountains, and also the Spanish film industry was actually pretty talented, technicians that pull off this stuff.
Exactly.
But let's start off with Sergio Leone. Sergio Leone, of course, was a wonderful director who only directed about, I believe, 5 films, and 4 of his films were westerns. This first film, of course, was the one we're going to be starting out with today, which is A Fistful of Dollars, which introduced everyone to Clint Eastwood as an international star. I mean, of course, Clint Eastwood was well known for his show Rawhide,
right.
But he was not really a household name. I mean, he was on TV, but he was not what you would call box office potential. He wasn't. In fact, I believe, I don't know if it's confirmed, that Clint Eastwood actually could not do a movie in America because of his contract to CBS. That's why he was able to do this film overseas.
I do not know the story behind that. All I know is that he wasn't Leone's first choice.
No, he was not. Leone's first choice was?
Charles Bronson.
Yes, and another person he wanted to be in the film was Henry Fonda. He tried many times to get him and would get him later, but not for this series. Clint Eastwood, of course, was really kind of bottom on the list, but they said that Sergio Leone actually saw a still of him on Rawhide, and it's where he's this clean-cut character on Rawhide, and he looked at it, and they said he took a pencil and he blackened his face, put some 5 o'clock shadow, and he said, maybe this can work. So they went and they wrote a script, or they had this script. It was based on Yojimbo, which is one of my favorite films from Akira Kurosawa.
They were ripping off Yojimbo.
Yeah, they were ripping off Yojimbo. In fact, they said Leone saw the movie in the theater in Italy and actually got people to go there and write the script verbatim, and then they would take the notes and make their own script out of it. If you look at Yojimbo, it makes sense. Yojimbo is a Western film, but with samurais.
Yeah, basically that's what it is.
Or you could say Fistful of Dollars is a samurai film, but set in the West.
You could say that too, but
it's really a gangster movie.
Or yes, and Eric will tell you it ripped off. And Yojimbo was guilty of plagiarism.
Yojimbo was a rip-off off a
Red Harvest
novel. Sorry, guys.
You're on a roll with the Pacifics and the novels.
It's my speech impediment.
Sure.
It's
a pet
Red Harvest, a novel by Dashiell Hammett. We discussed this in another CineFiles episode, but it seems like even though Kurosawa has denied it to his last dying breath that he ripped off Red Harvest, there are scenes in Yojimbo that are directly out of the novel.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, because Kurosawa, I mean, everyone can see his film. He was very influenced by Western culture, and so I mean, look at his films. John Ford is his biggest influence, and he loved detective stories. In fact, he did do kind of a detective story, High and Low, in that respect.
But strangely enough, this is actually not a Kurosawa film.
Well, it's important.
Well, it is kind of important because Kurosawa sued Sergio Leone for a fistful of dollars.
Yeah, and because they did. I mean, the Italians admitted to ripping off the movie. I mean, Leone said he saw it in the theater, but they said that it was a ripoff of Red Harvest.
It said theirs was an adaptation of Red Harvest, and you get the whole story about the Italian producer who bought the rights to Red Harvest, thinking that would cover his ass, even though they didn't win the lawsuit.
Actually, they said that the Kurosawa, they did win the lawsuit. They got 10% of the gross, and they got the exclusive distribution rights to Fistful of Dollars in Japan. So they did win. But let's get into the movie. The movie, of course, was a $200,000 movie. It was shot in Spain with Clint Eastwood as the lead, and he came up with the concept of this iconic character. You know, like they said he went to Beverly Hills. He went and bought like black blue jeans or black jeans. He also bought the cigars, and he had a couple other things. He brought pistol holders for the front.
Edwin watched the DVD extra documentary.
No, I think it's very interesting because
really
Clint Eastwood had a very good job. Did a very he helped create this.
But
character.
he did pretty much contribute to the look and.
Yeah, they said that they only, and then Leone, they actually found this poncho, which is they only had one, and they used it in the other 3 movies, and the hat. So if they lost it, it was gone. But they found this poncho.
He didn't use the same hat in Good, Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah, because they actually said it's a prequel. Because if you see in Good, Bad, and the Ugly, he actually finds the poncho for the first time.
If he's the same character, he may not be.
If he's the same character.
But anyways,
it's so ambiguous.
We're getting ahead of ourselves.
But anyway, let's get into
Fistful of Dollars.
Fistful of Dollars is a very good film. It's for what it is. My problem, of course, with the film is that it's so derivative of Yojimbo, because I'm very familiar with Yojimbo because it's one of my favorite films. It's just literally shot for shot some of the things, the dialogue and the situations.
But it's not even half the film that Yojimbo is.
No, it's not.
Of course.
Whereas Yojimbo,
It's a flawless
I
movie.
could follow that from beginning to end, no problem, enjoyed it thoroughly. I was bored senseless. I grew very impatient with it.
You know how many people are going to
$1,000.
people who are seeing this on YouTube right now are going to go like, Mike, what the fuck? Because this is
Actually, you know, a lot of people though, when you talk about the trilogy, a lot of people do think
It's the weakest of the
it's
trilogy.
Yeah,
weakest
it's
of the trilogy.
definitely the
So I don't think
weakest.
too many
Far.
people are going to like disagree with Mike too much. I don't think it's boring.
It was the last, to be fair, it was the last film of the trio that I saw. So Leone had set a very high bar. So now if I would have seen it, Jeff has said this before with other films that we've reviewed, if I would have seen that first,
You would have seen a progression.
and then I would have seen the progression, but instead I saw it last.
It's also very, I mean, making a comparison to Yojimbo, one of the reasons why it's a much better film is because, it's Kurosawa, but there's a more epic grandeur feel to Yojimbo, whereas this really feels low budget and pared down.
Yeah, the problem with this too is that as people might be aware who are fans of our show, a lot of films in Italy were shot without sound. They did this to save money because most of the actors who were in these films were usually an international cast of actors. You would have Italians, you would have Germans, you'd have French, you'd have all these people. So they would speak whatever their language was, and then later they would go into a studio and dub it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, even though you get Clint Eastwood delivering these lines in the studio later, it still has a canned feel, and it feels cheap, and it actually takes away a lot of the performance because it's not really done that well in this film.
Yeah,
It's gotten better. It did get better as it went along because the Americans saw that this was actually a movie that worth investing in because it had a mainstream appeal. They just put this out because they thought it was a B movie on a low half. Who gives a shit?
But I have to say about this film, unlike Mike, this is one of the few trilogies where I saw from beginning to end. I did not like the first one. The only thing I found exciting were some of the action sequences. And I saw Yojimbo after I saw this. Now, while I'm not in love with Yojimbo, I can't admit it's definitely a better film than this one. But I just felt like watching this, maybe it's because I didn't see it till recently, but it just reminded me of like when most actors who are known for television make the move to movies, whereas it's an iconic character, but I didn't feel the performance was that strong or that interesting. Even the film wasn't that interesting until the next 2 films came along.
I found the villains to be very flat.
Well, it's so funny.
Very
the
flat.
The villains,
and almost confusing because they all look like one another, too.
Well, the problem is also, if you notice...
The other problem, too, if I just want to interject, there's way too much emphasis on one set of villains. which is the other reason why Yojimbo's.
Yojimbo
it's a
is
great
more
idea.
balanced.
The story is a great story.
Yeah, well, everyone is a story is this.
But
is that-
the way for the story to work is that you have to have these 2 sets. In Yojimbo, I think there's like 3 sets of villains.
There's 3 sets
Like
of
these 3
villains.
families or 3 gangs that have taken over this town. This guy comes in. He's gonna like, okay, I'm gonna hire myself to each side. And through my wits and rumors innuendo, I'm going to step back while they destroy themselves and collect all the money at the end. It's a great idea, and somehow in Fistful of Dollars, you lose that sense of balance. It seems like there's way too much emphasis on one group of gangs.
It's not even. It's not even. Like one gang, you don't even really get to familiar. You just see them a couple of scenes.
And then there was, spoiler alert if you haven't seen the movie yet, who hasn't seen Fistful of Dollars at this point, but when they burn down the one house with that one family, like when that happens, it's like there's no impact because they never really made much of an impression as another potential corrupt component to this town. That's like I said before, it's like Fistful of Dollars is a very, very, very stripped down, almost minimalist version of Yojimbo.
For a $200,000 movie, I mean, it has its warts and all. It's a you can see it as a stepping stone to greater things later down the road. Because
Speaking of which, let's step on.
that's what I was about to do, my man. This is segue time, bitch. All right. As you can see, I said
That's our catchphrase now.
Yes,
It's a
bitch.
segue, bitch.
Segue, bitch. Now what was I saying? Oh, yes. Okay. So anyway, it came out. Fistful of Dollars did phenomenal business, and the Italians went back to Clint Eastwood and said, "We want to do a sequel." Clint Eastwood hadn't even seen the movie yet, because the original Fistful of Dollars, because it hadn't been released in America. So he was kind of hesitant to do it until they sent him the actual film, and he looked at the Fistful of Dollars and said it's actually pretty good, even though it was only in Italian when he saw it. So he said, "Okay, I'll do this again," and he got a huge pay increase. He went from 15 on the first film to 50,000. And they brought back the villain who was in Fistful of Dollars playing a different role.
Yeah.
And they also
Maria Volanti?
Yeah, I believe that is.
Is
Please
that,
forgive me.
our viewers
It's-
can correct me on that.
It's an Italian guy who I know someone on YouTube will actually correct us, even though we'll put a little correction in there somewhere. But he's in it, and also early appearance of Klaus Kinski, which is pretty good to see him in this film.
That's right.
He plays a hunchback, and there's a great scene with him and Lee Van Cleef, who actually was also cast this film. Of course, Leone again tried to get Henry Fonda.
Wait, what was the name of this film now?
This is for a few dollars more, excuse me.
Okay.
This is for a few dollars more. So they go out and they try to get Henry Fonda out of his price range. They try to get Charles Bronson. Charles Bronson still didn't see Fistful of Dollars. He wasn't interested in it. And so they went and they got Lee Van Cleef. Now, Lee Van Cleef was known as a character actor who was, in fact, Clint Eastwood said he remembered him from the Universal Backlot. He was like the villain you'd see on the Western show of the week.
Right.
He'd get shot and killed, and then he'd be on another show next week. They brought Lee Van Cleef in, and Lee Van Cleef is an excellent lead with Clint Eastwood. They play very well together.
It's interesting that you brought up the Henry Fonda thing, because later on, Sergio Leone was involved, and it's disputable or debatable about how much he actually directed, but My Name is Nobody.
Yes, was true.
And that film is basically the same dynamic. The Clint Eastwood character and the Lee Van Cleef character, this time he got Henry Fonda to play what is essentially the Lee Van Cleef role in that film.
But that's the problem too, because like originally, if I'm not mistaken, Henry Fonda's character, of course, is much older than Clint Eastwood, was supposed to be the mentor-father figure to Clint Eastwood in this movie. Well, Lee Van Cleef is a little bit older than Clint Eastwood, but not that much so it really didn't come that
They
didn't
kind of,
come
I
off
think,
well.
aged him a little bit, too.
They aged him a little bit, but it didn't work as well. I never
He works
thought-
as a mentor, but he doesn't work as a father figure.
Right.
No, he's a mentor.
But let me say, I've seen quite a few Westerns in my lifetime. And I will say that in this film, Lee Van Cleef is maybe the coolest Western character I ever saw in any Western. He is just such a badass. He's like James Bond of the West.
I
He
would
is
agree.
so cool. He's almost like a superhero. He's like Batman. He has these gadgets, but they're not cheesy gadgets. They're like these weapons that he's converted into being more efficient weapons, and these badass guns. And he's just so fucking smart in the film. And you just see that the villains that they're going up against, even though they're the quote unquote dastardly villains, you know that he's going to outwit them. He's just so much smart. He's like Batman of the West. That's like the best way. To say he's James Bond is one way, but he's like the Batman of the West. And he almost overshadows Clint Eastwood's character. Actually, in my opinion, he does overshadow.
He does, in
which
part,
is
yeah.
which
Yeah,
is
he's more
saying
the star of the
which is
film.
saying a lot. because Clint Eastwood once again is playing this archetype, but for Lee Van Cleef to step in and be this complete badass stud
I love
is amazing.
it. I think the reason that it works so well is that Lee Van Cleef really holds his own against Clint Eastwood. In fact, there's scenes where you forget Clint Eastwood's on screen because he's so magnetic. I mean,
and Clint Eastwood's pretty generous on screen with him too.
Yeah,
it's not like
they play well together.
Yeah.
But they can tell that they get along well. You can see they have great chemistry.
There is a good on-screen chemistry between these two.
There's a mutual respect.
And there's an interesting sort of mystery at the heart of like Lee Van Cleef's character, why he's there.
I like that. In fact,
what his actual goal is.
And in fact, I feel that Sam Peckinpah took a lot of these elements from this film and used it in The Wild Bunch.
Well, Sergio Leone took the same element and used it later on in Once Upon a Time in the West.
The flashbacks.
In fact, the flashbacks in that final duel, he reused in Once Upon a Time in the West.
Yeah, because the thing is that too is that Leone also, as Clint Eastwood actually says, is that Leone's trademark is that he would let a scene just take its time. He didn't give a shit. People to test their patience. That's why you see this gun battle, and it could go on for 10 minutes where they're just staying there, like posing and looking. What's Leone tried to get suspense from this, and it works really well. He's really obtuse camera angles, and it works really well.
Master camera composition.
They're like paintings.
Yeah,
they're like paintings.
Well, he said he actually studied art, or he knew he painted.
It's very clear.
It's very
the man
obvious.
has a wonderful
And we should
eye.
probably have this discussion after we discussed all three films, because it's basically an overview discussion.
Yeah. Well, let's get into that. We'll go to that.
But going back to what do we think of A Few Dollars More?
I think
it's
a
a better film.
Improvement, and in fact, it would be the best in the series if it wasn't for The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which is, I mean, we'll get into that in a minute, but I think it's an excellent film, and it really showed you Leone was not a hack master or a rip-off artist. He actually has a very good script in this one. Unfortunately, the first one is a decent script, but it's just a rip-off of Rio Jimbo.
But it establishes Leone as a storyteller.
Right. Yeah, this one definitely does, and I gotta say, I would say it could go up there nearly almost on par with Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Almost for me. Not almost.
No,
not quite, but almost. Well, anyway, this one became a huge hit. Again,
I'd like to talk about it for a few minutes. Well, I liked For a Few Dollars More a lot better than A Fistful of Dollars. There's only one thing that really bothered me at the film, and it's the scene that we later find out drives most of the film, and it's something that happens with a female character that sets the villain off for the rest of the film. And I found that scene, it didn't affect me dramatically the way it was supposed to, or the way the director intended. So it kind of threw me off for when the big reveal at the end of the film. But other than that, I really enjoyed the film.
All right, well, let's get into the next one. That's the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which again was For a Few Dollars More became another big hit, and so they went back to Clint Eastwood again. They offered him a huge salary. I think it was over $250,000, which is a pretty big jump from $15,000 for the first film. This time they brought back him and Lee Van Cleef in some, similar roles than what they played before.
Well, Lee Van Cleef played the antithesis to the character he played before.
Yeah, he's a real badass in this.
He's like a villain in this.
Yeah.
And Eli Wallach.
Hey,
Blondie.
One of the best things in the film.
Tuco. Originally, it was they said that they actually cast him in it because they saw him in How the West Was Won, and they liked the character that he played. And so they cast him as this Mexican bandit named Tuco, which has many great lines.
How the West Was Won or The Magnificent Seven?
How the West Was Won, 1962.
Okay.
I believe that's the one. Please forgive me if I'm wrong. I will put a correction in.
Because he plays a very similar character to the character he played in Magnificent Seven.
They said it was How the West Was Won. That's what he said on the DVD the other night.
What about The Misfits? Is it very similar to The Misfits?
Well, it
Same
doesn't
character?
matter. But anyway,
Baby
Eli
doll.
Wallach is in it, and he's terrific. And this one is, I think, the perhaps most amazing Western ever film. It is epic. Absolutely epic.
It's next to Once Upon a Time in the West. It's probably Sergio Leone's best film.
I would say it's his best
It
film.
has a definite grand feel.
And it's his most expensive film. Up at that point, I think that was his most expensive. They finally threw all this money at him.
Actually, that was up to that point. That's the most expensive. Film, right?
And it is an amazing. We talk about scope. We talk about composition. This feels like an epic movie, like a film that like a John Ford style Western, as opposed to a spaghetti Western.
I like using the term Grand Guignol.
Grand Guignol? Yes, that's not right.
Yes, it is, because it all builds towards the end of
Grand
that climate.
Guignol is about bloody.
Grand Guignol means it's building and building and building
Grand
to finally,
Guignol is
like a
not,
show.
that's not what you.
That
Who
is Grand
gives a
Guignol.
fuck?
No,
Time.
seriously. What are we talking about?
We were
Good,
talking about the
Bad,
good, the bad, the ugly, and how it's a
the whole
fucking
opening,
kick-ass
the
film.
sequence, like the introduction, the long introduction of each character.
Yeah.
It's like it takes like 15 minutes before we actually know what the title of the movie is. But the whole sequence was Lee Van Cleef, his introduction. Quentin Tarantino paid tribute to that in *Inglourious Bastards*.
What I love about this film is I love how Leone actually takes a lot of the historical, history of America, of what was happening at the time, with the North and the South, and integrates it into the plot. There's this wonderful scene where they actually have to pretend to be Union soldiers and blow up this bridge. And it's an amazing set piece that takes a very big chunk of the movie. And the amount of extras and the detail that he puts into this thing is unbelievable. In fact,
And a social commentary he puts into it.
yeah, he said
more
it's just the
explicit
war
than it
is
was in the previous
pointless.
films. Yeah.
The war was pointless, and he says, "I don't get, all these people dying." I think they said 200,000 plus people died at Andersonville, which was a very big prison for
Yes.
Union soldiers.
Very interesting that he did that. He wanted to do something that was Andersonville-like.
Yeah, I love it, and let's go on to the performances too. Lee Van Cleef, as you said, of course, in the first one he was kind of a badass, but with a mission. He had a purpose for being a badass. This one, he's a sadistic son of a bitch, and he somehow is just able to make him. He's just so cool, but yet so evil. I don't know how to describe his character.
He's a snake.
Yeah,
He's a
he's the
snake.
bad. He's the bad.
But it felt like a stylized performance also.
Yeah, we got to talk about Eli Wallach too.
He steals the film.
He's the ugly, but he's the human. Just to digress a little bit, to get an idea where Sergio Leone is trying to go with this, it's a theme throughout all of his films. But when we talk about the Western in general, he recognized something in American Westerns. That, in Europe, you have, Camelot and King Arthur, and you have like ancient Roman mythology, you have Greek mythology. But America's mythology is the Western. And he recognized that. And so there's a recurring theme where he plays up these archetypes in each film as almost mythological creatures, right? And you see this thing with each film as it starts to progress towards like the 20th century, so to speak, whatever, and technology starts to be informed either by like, trains and stuff like that. These characters are finding a difficult way of finding their place in this new world. And it's sort of like interesting. You see that more in Good, Bad, and Ugly. But he develops these three sort of myth types. You have the good, which is Clint Eastwood, iconic character. Then you have the bad, which is like the Lee Van Cleef villain character. And then you have Eli Wallach, the ugly, who's supposed to be the human character.
Well, this is funny.
Here do cinema.
This is something that I find very amusing. That I attempted to watch this film about maybe 10 years ago, maybe even longer, maybe like 15 years ago, and I could not get past the fact that Eli Wallach was not your typical bumbling, stumbling, drunk mess or whatever. I couldn't see him taking advantage of Clint Eastwood in any way, through cleverness or brute force or whatever. So I just shut it off. I was like, I can't watch this. This is completely unrealistic. So finally, even before we start on this topic, I think when they released maybe the DVD or something like a couple years ago.
They did a special edition.
Exactly.
version.
So I said, something? I've heard enough about this. I've got to see past whatever idiocy that I invested in 15 years ago. So I sat down, watched it, completely loved it, and saw that Tuco was a wonderful character. Eli Wallach acted his ass off.
Stole the movie from me.
But really, each character was portrayed so well and so fleshed out, and you didn't feel wanting with any one of the three main characters.
Not at all.
Each one had his stage, and he, like I said, with Eli Wallach, more so than the other two, but they were, Van Cleef and Eastwood were also very stellar. Everybody brought their A game to this, and once again, Sergio Leone, he just puts paintings up on screens. That's what he does. And the music.
That's what I want to get into.
Let's not forget the iconic music.
That's why I want to talk about that.
Yes, I'm talking about it now.
Morricone did all 3 of the films. That's why I was saying that for last, because his scores set a new precedent. What's amazing is that he's an Italian, doesn't really speak English, but he captures the Western feeling better than many of the American composers of that time. I mean, the man is perhaps the most prolific composer of his time. He really is. I mean, he has done everything. He's done movies for Dario Argento. He's done low-budget giallos. I mean, and then he's in a Hollywood movie from Brian De Palma. He's really traveled, and the man is still 80-something years old and is still making phenomenal.
Now, you say giallo, a lot of people out there aren't going to know what the hell you're talking about.
Yes, they will. Our fans will. Italian mystery thriller.
Whistle it.
I can't whistle.
Well, anyway, it's so funny is that all these bands have actually used the music from Good, the Bad, and the Ugly as their opening music. In fact, the Ramones used to play it when they went on stage. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And then that shitty group Metallica, yeah, fuck them. They use it too as well. They use the Ecstasy of Gold sequence as their opening theme music. So, and I mean, it's spoofed forever.
Don't you think? I don't know why I was thinking about this.
Isn't it ironic that Italians capture the Western better than the Americans do?
Well, it depends on the director.
I'm saying the consistency.
But what the Italians did, I mean, since we're specifically speaking about Sergio Leone, before Fistful of Dollars, there were European westerns.
They were.
It wasn't the first spaghetti western, but it was the first really popular spaghetti western that ushered in this whole spaghetti western.
There's a whole bunch of
craze.
There was some. There was
some
some TV program or movie or something that went out and said the best way to determine or to tell the difference between American westerns and spaghetti westerns is in spaghetti westerns they wore dusters, and in American westerns they didn't wear dusters.
And they were also dubbed in American.
And I don't even know if that's accurate or not, but that always stuck in my head for the longest time.
But the other big difference is that spaghetti westerns were a lot more surreal. They really upped the surreal quotient in terms of, like, Django, the guy, wherever he goes, he drags his coffin with him, and the coffin carries his Gatling gun. That's a
great movie. In fact, that's Franco Nero.
And it was more. They really pushed the mythological.
Well, we only got a couple minutes left, guys. So I want to ask you now, in preference. Of course, I think everyone here is going to say Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is probably the best film in the trilogy, and then I would say For $50 More would be next, and then Fistful of Dollars would that be your order? I think they go backwards because each one is a step up. I feel it's literally a step.
I would say that I would totally agree with that.
Now let's really briefly, we don't have much time. Why don't we talk about the film that was actually supposed to be maybe the fourth?
One more point
we only have
that I was going to make is I think it's just kind of interesting that of the 3 characters in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, 2 of those characters, their names essentially, Angel Eyes and Blondie, very feminine names.
Well, you know,
very feminine names.
Makes you laugh. This will make you laugh. Okay.
The
Man with No Name.
No,
this is funny. The Man with No Name in the second film was called Manco, right?
Sorry.
Well, you know what that means? You know what's so funny is that actually means pussy in Japanese.
Oh, was it Manco?
It is Manco. Yeah, his name is
Manco. Or was it Mancow?
No, it's Manco.
It's Manco.
I don't remember that ever coming up.
I just watched it last night with the wife, and she was laughing her ass off, because it's pussy.
Well, briefly, Once Upon a Time in the West, even though technically it's not a part of the trilogy.
It was supposed to be because
it's not even really a spaghetti western because it was that was Sergio Leone's first big Hollywood picture that was produced by Paramount. And wait, wasn't it 20th Century Fox?
No,
Paramount. Okay,
I guarantee it.
And the big irony is that he wanted Clint Eastwood to play the lead in that, couldn't get him, so he got Charles Bronson
finally as harmonica.
So
basically, Charles Bronson is playing the Man with No Name. It's supposed to be him, but it's Charles Bronson.
But that is probably his best. I mean, I change my mind a lot with the 2 films. Sometimes I like Good, the Bad, the Ugly better. Sometimes I'll rewatch Once Upon a Time in the West and go, nah, actually this is the better
I got to
film.
go with The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly because
Because that opening sequence in Once Upon a Time in the West
10 minutes of silence
is masterful filmmaking, probably better than any of the other films combined.
What I like about I like the spaghetti sauce that's on The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. It feels a little Hollywood, even though it's not, but it feels a little Hollywood.
Spaghetti sauce?
Well, you know what I'm saying? I like a little bit more.
That was
slang.
I like
a new
the
term.
cheese sauce on a few dollars.
Do we have
more.
anything positive positive say about that piece of shit, Fistful of Dynamite, otherwise known as Duck You Sucker? Because I hated that.
That is not the fault.
I hate that
That's
film.
not the
I like
fault.
that
That's
film.
not
I
his,
hated it.
That was originally
God.
Peter Bogdanovich film that Sergio Leone came on at the last minute to direct.
Well,
so.
it's just bad.
Well,
I like it.
all right.
Why?
Final thing before we go.
thought it's epic.
I would
Like,
highly
it's real.
recommend if any of you see
There's
the
too
good-
much carbonara sauce.
Hey,
on it.
if
I
you
like a
guys-
little bacon and a
If
little
any of you
cream.
guys see
I like
the
James
good, the bad, and the
Coburn
ugly, I would
in his
highly recommend you
performance.
stay with the original cut, not the extended version, which has the extra footage in it, because the actors went back and re-looped their dialogue.
Scene
And
chewing.
then they.
I actually like the extended
that makes
version.
I think
Quite a bit.
I think it's just that you can tell the voices are very old because they're older and it's kind of distracting. Well, anyway, that brings this show to a close. I definitely think maybe we can continue talking about the other 3 Leone films, which were Once Upon in the West and maybe Duck You Sucker and of course
Once
the
Upon a Time in America.
Oh, Once Upon a Time. Well, that's yeah, but
That's a
not
Leone. That's a
Not this
Vincenzo.
time, folks.
No.
Not this time.
Well, anyway,
Maybe one
hope
day.
you enjoyed this show. Please check out all the films. Check us out on
Ranky
YouTube
Knoll.
and all that stuff. And until next week, I'm Edwin Samuelson.
Built towards a climax, not blood.
Hey, let me finish my sign off here.